On a freezing night in San Francisco, a hungry little girl gathered every ounce of courage she had and whispered to a powerful CEO, "If I can make your son speak, will you give me your leftovers?" He laughed, because his boy had been silent for 7 years. But then, something no doctor, no therapy, no fortune could ever buy happened. The child's eyes met hers, and a voice broke through the silence, unveiling a story so powerful it would shatter secrets, rewrite destinies, and remind us all that miracles often come from the most unexpected places. This isn't just about hunger and survival. It's about family rediscovered, wounds healed, and the kind of love that transforms everything. Stay with us, because what follows may just change the way you see hope forever. And if you believe in second chances, subscribe to The Retold Stories for more unforgettable journeys. The November wind swept through San Francisco like a sharp warning, rattling street signs and cutting through every crack in the sidewalks. On a dimly lit corner, a small figure huddled against the chill, her threadbare jacket pulled so tightly around her ribs it looked ready to split. 7-year-old Emma Carter pressed her hands deeper into her sleeves, trying to keep her fingers from going numb. Hunger had long since replaced the ache in her stomach with a hollow emptiness, but her eyes still held a spark that refused to die out. She wasn't just another child begging for coins. She carried something heavier, a determination sharpened by years of surviving in the shadows. Across the street loomed the Granite Club, a glittering fortress of warmth and power. Behind its glass walls, men and women in tailored suits toasted their fortunes, their laughter spilling out into the night as chauffeurs pulled sleek cars to the curb. Emma watched from the shadow of a newspaper stand, invisible to everyone but herself. She had been standing there for almost an hour, waiting, calculating, as though her instincts knew something was about to shift. And then, she saw him. Cole Whitman stepped out of the grand doorway, his posture sharp and unyielding, the city lights catching the edges of his navy suit. Every movement he made was deliberate, the kind of control that came from years of commanding boardrooms and sealing billion-dollar deals. Beside him walked a boy, smaller, quieter, his gaze fixed somewhere far inside himself. Cole's hand rested protectively on his son's shoulder, but the boy's silence carried more weight than any father's touch could ease. Emma's heart thudded strangely. There was something about the boy's face, a familiarity that didn't come from memory, but from somewhere deeper, a place she couldn't name. His eyes flickered toward her, and in that single second she felt something ignite, as if a spark had been waiting for years to find a flame. Before she could second-guess herself, she darted into the street. A horn blared, tires screeched, but Emma barely flinched. She had run from worse dangers before. Reaching the curb, she called out, her voice trembling but firm. "Sir, please." Cole turned sharply, his steel blue eyes narrowing as they swept over her. He had seen desperate faces 1,000 times before, in alleys, in waiting rooms, even in the mirrored glass of his own regrets. His tone was flat, impatient. "I don't carry cash. I don't want money," Emma replied. She stood her ground, shoulders squared though her knees trembled. "I want a chance." That word made him pause. His son tugged lightly at his sleeve, but Cole didn't move. "A chance?" he repeated, his voice edged with disbelief. Emma took a step closer, her sneakers scraping against the concrete. "If I can make your son talk," she said, her breath forming clouds in the icy air, "will you give me your leftovers?" For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the hum of passing cars. Then Cole let out a laugh, sharp and humorless. It was the kind of laugh that belonged to a man who had spent too many years crushing hope before it could grow. But before he could guide his son away, a soft sound cut through the air like glass breaking. "She was in Mommy's belly with me." The voice was small, uncertain, but it came from the boy. Cole froze. His coffee cup slipped from his fingers, shattering on the pavement, the hot liquid spreading like a dark shadow. His son, his silent, wordless son, had spoken for the first time in 7 years. Emma's breath caught in her chest. She hadn't expected this, hadn't even known what she expected, but the boy's eyes were locked on hers, wide and alive, in a way that made the world tilt. Cole's mind spun. Therapists, specialists, endless tests, nothing had worked. For years, silence had been their companion, heavier than grief. And now, a stranger's presence had cracked it open, with a single thread of connection. The boy's voice quivered, but grew stronger. She was with me before we were born. The words seemed impossible, and yet Cole couldn't deny them. He looked from his son to the girl, and something inside him, a place long buried beneath ambition and sorrow, shifted. Emma stepped forward cautiously, her gaze never leaving the boy. "I've been looking for him my whole life," she whispered. The city around them seemed to fade. The honking horns, the clatter of heels on pavement, the laughter spilling from the Granite Club, it all dissolved into background noise. What remained was a moment suspended between disbelief and destiny, as though time itself was holding its breath. Cole felt the ground unsteady beneath him. Memories of his late wife Elizabeth flickered through his mind, her tired smile in the hospital bed, her voice faint as she whispered something he had long dismissed as the rambling of exhaustion. There were two. He had never believed it. Until now. The boy's hand slipped into Emma's, their fingers, curling together as though they had been waiting for this reunion all along. Cole's throat tightened, words failing him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a CEO or even a father weighed down by silence. He felt human, vulnerable. And standing before him was the possibility that the child he thought he had lost had somehow found her way back. He didn't know how. He didn't know why. But he knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. Emma sat stiffly at the long oak dining table, her feet barely touching the polished floor. The room was grand, filled with expensive art and shining surfaces, but she perched at the edge of her chair like she didn't belong, like one wrong move would shatter the fragile truce that had brought her here. Across from her sat Cole Whitman, his hands clasped so tightly that his knuckles had gone pale. Between them rested a plate of scrambled eggs and a glass of orange juice. Emma hadn't touched either. She hadn't asked for food, hadn't asked for anything since stepping into this penthouse. The only thing she wanted was to sit beside Miles. And she had done that without hesitation, curling up next to him as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Miles, the boy who hadn't spoken a word in 7 years, had changed overnight. His silence had cracked open like a shell. Words slipped from his lips, now shy, tentative, but real. When Emma teased him about the house being so shiny it could probably blind the moon, he laughed. A sound that rattled Cole to his very core. He stared at her across the table, this fragile stranger who had somehow walked out of the cold and broken through the silence that had ruled his son's life. His mind raced with questions, but his sister Dana was the first to voice them. "Emma," Dana asked gently, leaning against the kitchen island with her calm, clinical gaze. "Can you tell us where you came from?" Emma's fingers twisted together in her lap. "Here, yesterday," Dana pressed softly. "Before yesterday." Emma shrugged. "Lots of places." "And your parents?" Emma hesitated. "They told me my mom died when I was born. I never met her." "Who told you that?" "A woman named Caroline," Emma answered. "She drank the funny stuff in cans. Then she left, and she never came back." The words landed heavily in the room. Dana's eyes softened, but Cole felt something twist, painfully, inside his chest. Trauma wasn't new to him. He had read it in case reports and heard it in clinical terms from doctors. But hearing it spoken so plainly, so bluntly, from a child sitting across his own table was something else entirely. "Where have you been staying?" Dana asked softly. Emma tapped the side of her head. "Wherever I had to." "She's street smart," Dana murmured, half to herself. "Hyper alert. Resilient in a way kids her age usually aren't." Cole clenched his jaw. "She's been through hell," Emma's eyes flicked to him. "Not hell, just hard." A silence settled between them before she reached into her backpack, pulling out a folded piece of paper, edges worn from years of handling. She slid it across the table. Cole unfolded it with trembling hands. A young woman smiled back from the faded photograph, auburn hair framing her face, her eyes achingly familiar. "I don't know her," Emma said softly. "But I've always felt like I should." Cole turned the photo over. On the back, in delicate handwriting, were the words, "For when she's old enough to remember." His throat closed. He knew that handwriting. Elizabeth, his late wife. He shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the polished floor. Without a word, he left the room and shut himself in his study. His hands shook as he opened a locked drawer and pulled out an old album. Flipping through, he froze when he reached a photo of Elizabeth at 21. The resemblance was undeniable. Emma's. Hair. Her eyes. She wasn't just similar. She was part of her. When he returned to the dining room, Dana was studying Emma carefully. "Emma, why did you say you and Miles were in your mommy's belly together?" Emma glanced at her brother, who was quietly stacking toy dinosaurs. "Because it's true." Cole felt the room sway. "But how do you know that?" Dana asked. Emma blinked slowly. "Because I remember." The words sent chills through the room. And then, as if the universe wanted to confirm the impossible, Dana spotted the faint crescent-shaped birthmark on Emma's shoulder, the same mark Miles carried. Cole's vision blurred at the edges. The world tilted. Every rational part of him screamed for logic, for science, for reason. But there was no denying it. They needed proof, cold, hard evidence, and the DNA test gave it to them. A 99.999% probability. Emma and Miles weren't just connected by chance or circumstance. They were twins. When Emma read the results, her hands trembled. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "For real?" Cole knelt beside her. "For real." She didn't sob or scream. She simply sat on the floor, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. And then, for the first time in 7 years, Cole opened his arms and held the child he never knew he had. Days blurred together after that. Everything that once mattered to Cole: meetings, deadlines, investor calls, fell away. All that mattered was the fragile miracle sitting at his dining table, sketching dreams on scrap paper and humming lullabies she shouldn't have known. One night, Emma's quiet humming drifted through the hallways. Cole stopped cold, his chest tightening. It was Elizabeth's melody, the lullaby she had whispered while pregnant. He hadn't heard it since the night she died. When he confronted Emma, she looked confused but certain. "I've known it forever," she said softly. "It helps me sleep." It was the final thread, tying past to present, confirming what his heart already knew. Elizabeth's voice had carried through her children. The house began to change. What had once been a sterile penthouse of glass and steel began to soften. Laughter echoed through the halls where silence had once reigned. The sound of pencils scratching across paper replaced the emptiness of corporate calls. Emma and Miles moved as if they had always been two halves of the same whole, their bond undeniable. One evening, Cole found them sprawled across the living room rug, trading drawings of a sterile room with two bassinets separated by glass. Without prompting, they had drawn the same dream, the same memory. A man in a lab coat, cold walls, division. Dana's voice was quiet but firm. That kind of shared recall is rare. It happens with twins who are deeply bonded, even those separated too early to remember consciously. Cole didn't want to believe it. But the evidence piled higher with every passing day. The truth was out there, and Cole vowed he would find it, no matter what it cost. The sleek black Tesla rolled to a stop at the edge of a broken curb. The street before Cole looked forgotten, lined with sagging porches, cracked sidewalks, and windows patched with cardboard. It was the place Emma had once called home, or something close enough to pass for one. The car felt out of place here, its polished chrome gleaming against the ruins of a neighborhood that had been abandoned by hope long ago. Emma shifted uneasily in the back seat, clutching her backpack as if it held all that mattered. Miles reached over, threading his small fingers through hers, and for a moment Cole thought they looked more like survivors than children. Cole stepped out, his expensive shoes crunching against gravel. The house in front of him was a one-story structure with yellow paint peeling like scabs, the front fence drooping as though exhausted from years of holding itself upright. This was where Emma had endured nights alone, wrapped in trash bags to keep out the rain, while he had been reading bedtime stories to Miles in a penthouse across the city. The guilt pressed down like a weight on his chest. He knocked. No answer. The silence was so heavy, it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. "Can I help you?" The voice came from across the street. An elderly woman sat on a stoop, wrapped in a knit cardigan. Her eyes were sharp, suspicious, but softened when Cole described the little girl who used to live there. "You mean Emma?" the woman said slowly. "Quiet one. Used to dig in trash cans. Kept her head down. I gave her granola bars sometimes. She slept under that porch once, in a rainstorm, wrapped up in a trash bag like it was a blanket." Cole swallowed hard, his throat aching. He thanked the woman and walked back to his car. He couldn't stop picturing Emma curled beneath that rotten porch while he had lived in luxury. It was more than unfair. It was a theft of childhood itself. He called his investigator. "I want everything. Foster records, birth reports, sealed files. Nothing redacted." His voice was iron. He needed the truth. Days later, the truth began to unravel, piece by piece. Sharon Oakes, the nurse on duty the night of Elizabeth's delivery, finally admitted what she had carried for years. She told him of a plan, an adoption arranged in secret, a decision masked as mercy but driven by greed and control. Cole's rage was a storm contained only by the promise of justice. "You separated my children," he said, his voice shaking with a fury he could barely contain. "You carved my family in half." Sharon's eyes were wet with guilt. "I was following orders. That's not an excuse. That's cowardice." The pieces all pointed back to Dr. Marcus Lang, the man who had once stood beside Cole at Elizabeth's funeral, offering condolences like a friend. Now Cole saw him clearly. A manipulator, a predator, cloaked in respectability. The FBI confirmed it. Lang wasn't just a doctor, he was the architect of a shadow network called Gemini Cognition, obsessed with the neurological potential of twins. Emma and Miles had been part of an experiment from the very moment of their birth. Cole felt the ground shift beneath him. It wasn't just about his family anymore. There were others, other children. Other lives broken apart in the name of science, twisted beyond recognition. The threats escalated. One evening, while Cole was out of town pursuing a lead, there was an attempted break-in at the penthouse. Security stopped them, but the intruders carried tranquilizer darts and restraints. They hadn't been after jewelry or money. They had come for the twins. Cole's blood ran cold when Dana called him, her voice trembling despite her strength. "They were professionals, Cole. They were coming for Emma and Miles." He returned within hours, his jaw set, his resolve harder than steel. "No one will ever take them again," he promised. He moved his family to a fortified coastal estate in Santa Barbara, not a mansion to flaunt wealth, but a sanctuary to shield what mattered most. Former Secret Service guarded the gates. Dana moved into the guest house, her presence grounding the children. The house began to transform. Cold marble was replaced with warm wood. Hallways filled with laughter instead of echoes. Emma's room blossomed into a safe haven, her sketches taped to the walls, her stuffed dolphin perched proudly on the bed. Miles claimed a sunlit room as his laboratory, filling it with Legos and inventions. For the first time, the penthouse walls no longer felt like a cage of wealth, but like a home, beating with life. Cole founded the Whitman Foundation for Twin Healing and Ethics, vowing that no child would suffer what his had. The foundation funded reunions, medical care, and ethical research, reshaping the legacy Elizabeth had once begun. Yet shadows remained. Lang had vanished. A fire destroyed his cabin, a body found inside, but unrecognizable. Was he dead or hiding, waiting to reclaim what he believed belonged to him? Cole didn't know. But one night, as Emma and Miles built a fort of blankets and fairy lights, placing a paper crown on his head and declaring him their king, he made a silent vow. "I will guard you," he thought as their laughter rang out. "With everything I am, with everything I have." The ocean crashed against the cliffs below their home, steady and unyielding, as if echoing his promise. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Cole Whitman knew his true purpose, not in empires, not in wealth, but in the fragile miracle of two children who had once been separated and who now, against all odds, had found their way back to each other. When we first met Emma, she was nothing more than a shivering child standing on a street corner, asking for leftovers in exchange for a miracle no one believed possible. In that single moment of courage, she not only gave a hungry voice to her own need, but awakened the silence that had bound her brother for 7 long years. From the cold pavement to the warmth of a home, from abandonment to belonging, Emma and Miles's journey is proof that sometimes The most extraordinary miracles are hidden in the most ordinary requests. Their story reminds us that love is not measured by wealth, nor is family defined by circumstance. It is in the act of choosing to believe, to protect, to stand by one another, even when the world feels hostile, that families are born and healed. Cole Whitman, once a man ruled by calendars and contracts, learned that the truest empire he could ever build was not of glass towers or financial empires, but of two children who had been waiting for him all along. The threads of their lives, Elizabeth's lullaby, the crescent-shaped birthmarks, the dreams that carried across years of separation, are not coincidences. They are reminders that love endures, that connections run deeper than time, distance, or the cruelty of those who would tear them apart. Even in the darkest corners of forgotten neighborhoods, even in files sealed by greed and betrayal, truth finds a way to rise. Emma and Miles show us that healing does not erase scars. It transforms them into maps of resilience. The laughter echoing in their new home is not just sound, it is survival turned into music. It is proof that no matter how long silence holds us, there is always a chance to speak again, to laugh again, to live again. And so, their journey is not only theirs, it belongs to all of us who have ever felt lost, who have ever wondered if we were forgotten, who have ever longed for a place to belong. Their story asks us to believe in second chances, to see miracles not as accidents, but as choices we make when we refuse to give up. If Emma could find her way home through hunger and hardship, if Miles could discover his voice through the bond of family, then what might each of us rediscover if we hold on a little longer, believe a little stronger? This is why we share their journey with you, because hope multiplies when it is told, and love grows stronger when it is remembered. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Join us, be part of this circle of resilience and faith, and carry these miracles forward. Subscribe to the Retold Stories, where every story is a reminder that no matter how broken the past may seem, the future can still be rewritten with love, courage, and the belief that family chosen or found can change everything.